with us at DWC, we're glad to have Bradley Knight. Everybody's heard of Bradley Knight. Bradley Knight, I mean, if you've heard Larry Goss, you've heard Bradley Knight. If you've heard Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir, you've heard Bradley Knight. Bradley Knight is one of the greatest orchestrator and arrangers in America right now for music. Some of you have been watching right now during the streaming of all this stuff going on with the coronavirus. If you've seen a lot of that, you've seen Bradley leading a lot of worship, him and his wife and others with him. And we just really appreciate your ministry, Bradley. And thank you for taking time. We know you're in the car. He's just doing social distancing today. That's always good.
Today I'm doing kid distancing.
So, kid distancing, good. So why are you in the car again? Tell us about that.
Well, you know, my family lives in New York City because I am on staff at the Brooklyn Tabernacle. And we made the decision a few weeks ago that it was the safest thing to do. And it was even kind of recommended by the governor of New York to, if you had the opportunity to leave New York, you should. And so we did. And we've made a couple stops along the way. My family lives in South Carolina. We stopped with them for a little bit. And then we have been in Texas for a few weeks now. My kids are staying with my mother-in-law, and my wife and I are staying at my sister-in-law's house, which is just about 10 minutes apart. And so we're kind of going back and forth. And so we come over in the morning and help the kids with their school. And then once it's bedtime, we put them down and then we go back. So that's kind of our situation. So all the kids are inside right now doing school. And this was the quiet place, the sanctuary I could get away to have this conversation with you guys.
Interesting. I hear people like you, young people like you, and you talk about putting your kids down. I want to correct you, say something. You put your dogs down, you put your kids to sleep, okay? I don't think you put your kids down last night. Bradley, what we do at DWC is we pair worship leaders with churches. And we find great worship leaders for great churches. We do that all across America and Canada and all. But what we want to talk about today is your impact on the local church. One of the things we try to do is impact the local church in so many ways. Like I tell our guys, we have a lot of consultants with us. We tell them we're not suggestions, we're consultants. We all know church music, and we know who's involved in church music, what they do, and what they're like. Now, I understand the way I came across getting to know you was through my son, Matt. Matt, why don't you share a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah, you know, Bradley, we go way back to college. It seems like sometimes it seems like yesterday, sometimes it seems like it's been forever. You know, you were in voices, I was in campus choir, and of course we really met when we took orchestration together under Larry Goss. One of the questions I have for you today is I'm just curious. You know, your background, clearly you're a huge Larry Goss fan, and, you know, maybe talk about, you know, how I felt when we were going through that class. It was a little surreal, you know, hearing him talk about his, the way that he writes and hearing his music and all of those kind of things. I'm just curious, you know, how far back in your life, you know, you can remember finding out about Larry, loving Larry, you know, him being an influence and maybe some of the other influences in your life that, you know, have kind of molded you all across, you know, to becoming the arranger, you know, that you clearly have been.
Sure. So my dad was a music pastor in South Carolina. He just retired maybe 5 or 6 months ago. And so I was exposed to all this kind of church choir music very early on. And I would say that it was in my early teen years that I first really started to pay attention to church music and started to notice some of the names on the paper I was seeing. And so I noticed Larry Goss's name for sure. And then another friend that has become a great friend is Jaron Davis. So I think as far as in choral music, print music back in the day, those were the two names that really kind of caught my attention. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, so anything that had that kind of spirit to it was definitely a little bit more magnetic to my heart. And so Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir, Christ Church Choir, Jaron, of course, this was back when Jaron was at the Pentecostals of Alexandria. So I would say those three choirs in particular really captivated my heart as I would listen to them and really tried to emulate them. And I even started arranging some for my dad when I was a teenager there at our little church, our little 200 and something member church out in the country in South Carolina. um, but yeah, that's kind of where it all started. And my dad, I really am grateful that he chose to take me along with him when he would go to this music conference at the Church of God denomination. That's the denomination I grew up in. They used to do a music conference called Music Explosion, and it was held on the campus of Lee University. And my dad took me as a teenager, and that's where I got to meet Larry Goss. Dad took me into one of Larry's little workshop classes where he was talking about piano playing or whatever. And I got to meet him, and Larry had me sit down and play for him. I'm just a teenager, and this is a gospel music legend. And he just took me in right there as a kid and wanted to hear me play. He stayed in touch with me, helped me out. I actually did a talent competition a couple of years later. He helped me with my arrangement. As a teenager, I mean, it's just crazy to think that Larry Goss would do that for me. And even Jaron was the same way. Jaron, he wrote letters to me to encourage me as a musician. And so those two guys in particular really had a big imprint on me as a teenager and kind of laid the foundations for what I was going to end up doing for the rest of my life.
Wow. How old were you when you started playing, Bradley?
Well, I mean, my parents, everybody in my family is a musician. We've got a Southern gospel group, the Roy Knight Singers, that travel around in the bus, and all that. So, and my dad was a music pastor. Both of his brothers were music pastors. My granddad was a pastor, but it was that kind of situation where the pastor's wife played the piano, and actually my granddad played the organ. So they were on either side of the stage. I mean, everybody in my brother is a professional drummer. It just runs in the family. Literally, that phrase is with us. And so they had me to start taking piano lessons when I was really young. I didn't think I was very good, but they all did. But eventually I kind of drifted away. I didn't want to practice. I wanted to play baseball, whatever. And so I kind of drifted away from taking piano lessons. But I did start to play the trumpet in 6th grade in middle school because my dad was a trumpet player when he was in high school. And so I chose to be in the band and started to play the trumpet. That's really where I kind of honed reading music skills. And then I guess as I was about 13 or so, my dad came back from that Music Explosion conference, and he had a CD and a choir book from Jaron Davis's choir, and it was called Praisin' Live. And he played something for me off of that Jaron had done, this crazy cool little kind of a black gospel intro. And I thought, if I wanted to play piano, that's the way I would want to play. And I took the book, I went and sat down in our little front room that had the upright piano and started to play that. And 2 weeks later, I was accompanying my dad's choir in church. It was just like that.
One of the things churches ask us is, now we might be in the Midwest, we might be in the West, where are you going to get your candidates? And we had one church, Bradley, that was in South Alabama, and another company had worked with them prior to us getting them. And they brought a guy in from Chicago to South Alabama. Well, the guy didn't last but 8 months. I'm sorry, 8 months. He lasted 8 months there. My point is you got to get somebody regional or cultural when you pull a candidate into a church. So I said, if you're going to have somebody in Alabama, a church, you got to get a Bubba out of Alabama or some area. How is it working out for a kid from South Carolina working in New York? Tell us about that.
Well, I think it's because of the culture that Pastor Cimbala and Carol have built at the Brooklyn Tabernacle for the 40 years plus that they have been there. I mean, it's a church that really does not have, it's hard to say. All I can tell you is it's a very broad umbrella that they welcome into that church. And so there are many different styles of music. If you look at all the projects that they have sung over the years, if you look at the guest artists that they have had over the years, it's everything. I mean, they've had Larnell, they've had Sandy, they've had the Collingsworth family, they've had Southern gospel groups, black gospel groups, Abbey Mason, Phil Wickham, you name it, they have it. And so I really don't think that the culture really mattered to them as much as how does your spirit fit in with the spirit of the Brooklyn Tabernacle? And so I think that's really what makes it work.
Wow.
Oh, hey, nobody there even talks about my Southern accent. I mean, because they've had so many people come through that are Southerners that they're just used to it. They don't. Nobody says a word to me about that.
Do you have those moments since you've been there of I know that you've been able to experience a ton of things. Do you have those moments where you kind of look around and you're like, wow, this is Brooklyn?
Absolutely, all the time, and the funny thing is, when I first kind of left Lee and started interning with Larry, I did about a 6-month internship with him. One of the first things that I got to do was he had me on the orchestra session for Brooklyn Tabernacle's High and Lifted Up album. And he let me conduct the orchestra. So I conducted the orchestra on their recording of Total Praise and their recording of Father We Adore Thee and all these great songs from that album. I was standing in front of that orchestra, and I was, 20, 21 years old, just couldn't believe what was happening. And then to be there and play Total Praise with that orchestra track that I conducted, 20 years ago, that was pretty surreal. And to play songs like He's Been Faithful and, some of those songs, but to be in the presence of that church, the way that they worship is just unbelievable. I mean, yeah, there are lots of those nostalgic kind of moments, but there's also a lot of fresh moments, that it's just a unique experience every time.
When you arrange a song, do you ever think of things like there's going to be somebody in a small church like I used to be and going to be playing my stuff? I'm going back to that church I was telling you about earlier. That's a local church here in Tennessee. And when my accompanist starts the intro of Waymaker, you're the one that came up with that creation. You're the one that did that. And she's playing your stuff. How does that make you feel? And when you're wanting to impact a church, do you think about something like that as you're doing the arrangement?
I can't say that I'm really thinking about wanting to impact a church. For me, it's just about what worship experience I'm having with that particular song. And can I translate this for a church? It's not necessarily about wanting to impact the church per se. When I sit down to do an arrangement, my mentor in college, and Matt, is Danny Murray. He was the director of the Voices of Lee, and his big philosophy, even though he didn't arrange our music, when we were learning music, his thing was always about his phrase was find the goodie. You got to find the goodie in the song. And I think what that means was, and what I have taken from that is, I want to find the part in the song that ministers to me the most, and I'm going to drive on it. And I'm going to do whatever I can to emphasize that and highlight it so that it stands out. And so that's kind of always been my philosophy with arranging, more so than trying to impact the church. It's just I'm trying to make the song the best it can be, because that's what really makes great music, is the great songs. And of course you can ruin a song with a bad arrangement, but a great song, that I just want to highlight that song and do the best job I can with it.
Bradley, I know that you and your wife have over the last few years have been doing, and maybe longer than that, I don't know, been doing some workshops, with some of these churches. And, that's just another way that you guys are impacting the local church, regardless of the size of the church or whatever is going on.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about what you guys do. If you're going in on a weekend, you're working with the worship teams, maybe you're leading worship. What does a typical workshop look like for you guys?
It just depends on what that particular church is looking for. And the Symbolers are very gracious with me and my schedule. When we first started, they knew that I already had this kind of thing going on, and they said, we don't want you to stop that. You keep being you. You do what you do and do all the projects you want to do, all that. And so just about once a month, Holly and I are able to go out and do these. For instance, right before the shutdown, I was at a church in South Carolina and worked on them. They had purchased an Easter musical that I had done. And so all day Saturday, we just worked on that Easter musical, and that was it. I flew in, did that, and flew out. Then I've had some churches that I'll come in on a Friday night and we'll have a, kind of a banquet or retreat type thing, speak to them on Friday, and then we'll do some rehearsals on Saturday and then do worship together on Sunday. Sometimes it's a full concert. Sometimes I'm just helping out with their typical Sunday morning service. And then I have even done full weekend retreats where I spoke all weekend and taught all weekend and sang and done it all. So, and we've done, Holly is very good at teaching classes with people that are like soloists or frontline people for churches that have a praise team up front, to talk to them about stage presence and how they hold their microphone and working with teleprompters and all kind of things like that. So we've got a whole lot of different aspects that we were able to work on when we do those weekends.
So as far as worship's concerned, and you write in choir arrangements, what is your philosophy? What is your thinking about worship and choirs and doing worship choirs for contemporary music? Have you given any thought to that, or are you doing any of that? What is your thinking?
I kind of do some of everything, over the years, and that's kind of been a blessing for me, is because of my background and the way I have been trained. In school, I was in marching band, I was in chorus, did classical music, all those kind of things. And I was exposed to Southern gospel. I was exposed to Black gospel. And so genre is really whatever you put in front of me, I'm willing to work with it and can do that. So when it comes to contemporary worship and choirs, the part that I have tried to really make sure that I honor is making sure that it still feels like the choir feels important. There are a lot of occasions in contemporary worship where they have a choir, that the choir is really just a big group of background vocals.
Right.
And it's not really choir-led worship. It's still just one guy out front, and then he's got, anywhere from 50 to 200 people behind him, and that's it. And a lot of times they're even singing unison or two-part. They're not really singing all the harmonies that choirs are capable of, and really enriching the sound and giving it that special touch that a choir can do. So even when I do contemporary choir arrangements or contemporary worship arrangements, I'm still really working to honor the choir and make sure that they feel valuable, because when it comes to worship, that is the heartbeat of the church. In just the church's expression of worship, it is so much led by a choir. And I think the more people that you have that are expressing that, the stronger your church's expression is, more than just one or two people that are really taking the reins. The more people that you have, the more powerful that heartbeat is of worship in your church.
I'd love to just sort of get a little bit of a Cliff Notes version of your experience at Abbey Road Studio, about how that came about, being there the first time, how did it happen, what you guys were doing, the project, all that kind of stuff, man.
Wow, that was a very, very special day. That was a project that I did for Prestonwood when I was at Prestonwood. We were really working it for our Christmas production, which is a massive production there. Huge budget, and a budget that doesn't come out of the church budget. It's totally covered by ticket sales. And so that particular year, we had decided we were going to do a brand new 22-minute long living nativity. And once we decided to do that, it's like, okay, well, we really need to go big on the production side. And really the focus there was going to be, let's do it big with the orchestra. And so we started researching the possibility of going to London. I talked to David Hamilton, who has produced Michael W. Smith's, those big Christmas albums that Michael W. Smith has done. David Hamilton is the one driving those things orchestrally. And so I talked to him and got some advice. And so we went there and recorded at Abbey Road in Studio One, which is the big room. It's where tons and tons of movie soundtracks have been recorded. And that room is amazing. I mean, I'll never forget just dropping the baton for that first song, and just the sound in the room. It's exactly right. I mean, we hardly had to do anything with it in the mix. That room is just magic. And you talk about feeling out of place as a redneck in London, in Abbey Road. And I mean, the players that are around, the first chair cellist that's right, 6 feet away from me, he played all of the tin whistles that you hear on the Braveheart soundtrack and on Titanic.
Wow.
And I've got French horn players that played on Star Wars and whatever. I mean, it was just, I was scared to death walking into that place and really felt unworthy, like you were saying. But once we started that first piece and I started it, and I could even see it on the musicians' faces because they don't know me. They don't know my music at all. I'm just the hired gun that, has come in today to work with them. And I could see it with them once we started, and I could see the tension ease. That they thought, okay, this is going to be a good musical day. It was comfortable for the rest of the day. And what an experience. I will never, ever forget it for the rest of my life.
Share with me your heart about worship in light of what you do. I mean, and I'm going to tell you something, it comes through in those videos that you guys are doing right now. There are people all over America just lifting their hands and really becoming demonstrative about what you're doing and what you're singing. Address that, if you will. Well,
I mean, I think probably the quote that has most stood with me over the years about worship is just our expression of gratitude for who God is in our lives. And so when I'm singing a worship song, it's very personal. And I try to think that way when I'm choosing songs. As I'm leading songs, I'm thinking about this song in my life. I'm not just singing a song. And I think for churches that have really strong spirit of worship, that is the key ingredient. That the people have learned to get away from, I'm just singing a melody and I'm just repeating the words that I see on the screen. They have taken those songs to heart. They have applied those lyrics into their lives. They've thought about Waymaker. Okay, I can think about the times that God has made a way for me. And so now when I sing this song, it is personal. That is worship. Worship is not just the repetition of the songs and the repetition of the melodies. That's kind of, if you really think about it, that part of it is almost what we say when we speak about there's a difference between having religion and there's a difference between religion and relationship. I think that's the difference between just singing songs and worshiping. When you're just repeating that melody and repeating those lyrics and actually taking those songs to heart and making them apply to your life. That's why, when we worship at the Brooklyn Tabernacle, somebody recently was there and they had a great word about it. They said that church worships out of a place of desperation. When they sing songs like Waymaker, it's because those people have really seen God make a way. It's hard sometimes for churches that are in, shall we say, comfortable environments to really embrace a song like that, because in some ways they've been able to make their own way and haven't had enough occasion to see God make a way. And so making that connection can be hard sometimes, but that's the key. You've got to make connections with these songs and think about what all the things that God has done for you. Our most recent living room worship set we did with David and Nicole Binion, and one of the songs that we did on that evening was Standing. And it's a song about standing on the promises. And some of the words say, we will face the darkness around us as he breaks the chains that have bound us. We're going to see the impossible. We believe the supernatural. It's those words. And for us, for Holly and I, that song was with us while we were in Africa working through the process to adopt our kids. And you talk about a heavy, heavy experience and having to just go through roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. That song kept us going, that we knew we were going to see the impossible happen. And so now when we sing that song, we're not just singing a song and an arrangement. We know we are singing our truth. That's what it means to worship the Lord in spirit and in truth. It means you have got to worship the Lord in the truth that you know him to be, in the truth that he is in your life. That's what that means.
As worship leaders, we've had to, do other things in other ways. And I know from watching you guys, your worship experiences that you guys have been doing. I'm sure you can speak to this, and I just want to kind of hear your thoughts. Is that I'm sure it's felt just as powerful in that room, as some church services you've been in, and it just shows you that worship is so much more than about the place that you're in or the building or the fact it may be Sunday morning.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. But I would also add to that, I think that when things do start to change and we are able to gather back again, I think that our worship experiences together are going to be so much more powerful because we do miss the corporate aspect, because it's biblical. It's the way God designed it. And so to be able to gather back together again and lift our voices again, and for choirs to be able, I think our choir lofts are going to be more full than ever.
Absolutely.
Because I think people are missing that aspect. And, we always tell people at the beginning of our living room worship sets, please sing along with us. And we really hope that they are right where they are, but, they might not be. They may just be listening. And so I'm hoping that people are going to be excited to use their voice again and to combine their voices with other people in their church. I think that's going to be really exciting when we're able to gather back together again.
Got 4 questions for you to really quickly answer. Outside of Christian music, what's your favorite song?
Oh, wow. I'd have to say I Keep Forgetting by Michael McDonald.
That's a good one.
All right. Number 2, who's your favorite orchestra arranger outside of Christian music?
Well, I mean, I guess I would say composer, and that would be John Williams.
Okay. Who's your favorite singer outside of Christian music?
Celine Dion.
Okay. And what is your favorite keyboard?
Well, okay. It's not really a quick answer because here's the thing. I don't just use a stock keyboard. I use sounds in my laptop. So
okay.
I'm using a piece of software called Keyscape, and it is amazing. It's got a Yamaha. That's basically the big sample in it, but it also has got great Rhodes and Wurlitzers and some vintage keyboards, some Celeste, all kinds of really odd keyboards that are in there. And so it doesn't really matter what physical instrument I'm playing, I'm going through that to get my sounds. So,
with technology these days, how they are you just capable of, setting up shop, in an airplane and being able to get locked in and just write, not being at home in your studio or at work or wherever,
Yeah. Part of that just comes from, years and years and years of orchestrating. I kind of know, I don't even have to hear it. I know what it's going to sound like as I'm putting it in the computer. And so actually if you might be familiar with the Prestonwood Choir project, The Threshold of Glory.
Yeah.
That entire album I orchestrated in Africa without I didn't have anything. It's basically we're riding through the jungle and I've got my laptop plugged into the cigarette lighter adapter, and I'm orchestrating that project. So I did that whole project in Africa. But yeah, wherever I can find enough space to set my laptop, I can go.
As long as you keep doing French horn rips, we'll continue to love it.
You got it.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you so much, Bradley, for your time today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.